Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the February meeting of Transportation Committee, the Transportation, Public Safety, Sanitation, and Environment Committee. Just put some guidelines in the chat, and I'll just go through those real quick. As I mentioned, this meeting is being recorded. All attendees, please sign in with your name and affiliation. The chat should just be used to sign in and to speak about technical issues. The chat will only go to the panel. I will announce when each agenda item is up. We have 2 agenda items this evening. Please use the raise hand function during the public part of the discussion, and I'll call on you. And then there's just a couple other guidelines there. If anyone has any questions, just reach out there. Our first item is approval of last month's minutes. Are there any objections from committee members? Hearing none, let's go to a roll call vote, but do we see any other committee members as attendees?
I'm watching them.
I see July just popped up. I'm going to promote July. I mean, that might be it for now. But okay. Wendy, let's do a roll call vote.
David Crane.
Here.
Joshua Waterman.
Here.
Wendy Lee here. Lee Berman. Lee Berman.
He's out today.
Okay. Tariq Darrell. Tariq. Kenya Hernandez. Kenya Hernandez. Michelle Coopersmith.
Present.
David Louie. David Louie. Richard Ropiak.
Here.
July Yang. Just saw her. July.
Here. Sorry,
Okay,
I don't know
great.
when you called me, Wendy, but I just heard it. I had some problem.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much.
And then I saw Kenyelle popped in moments after her name was called. Maybe
Oh.
we could get her in as a
Right.
present as well.
Right,
Hey, Kenyelle,
sorry.
no problem. We were just approving last month's minutes.
Perfect timing.
Great. So moving right along to our first agenda item today, from the Office of Technology and Innovation and City Bridge, talking about the deployment of 7 Link NYC 5G kiosks in the district. So we have some speakers from I know Stacy from OTI. I'm not sure who will be presenting, but in just a minute, I'd love to hand it over to you and your folks. Then we will turn to committee for clarifying questions from our speakers, and then we'll move to comment from the public, and then we'll bring it back to committee. But Stacy and whoever else, please take it away.
Great. Thank you guys so much for inviting us to present tonight. I'm Stacy Gardner. I'm a Senior Director of External Affairs for the Office of Tech and Innovation. You all might formerly have known us as DoIT, or any of the other mayor's offices we absorbed. We're just one big happy tech family now, under the guidance of our Chief Technology Officer. With me is Brett Sykoff. He is the Executive Director for Franchise Administration at OTI. We also have Rob Zakota and Nick Colvin. They are from City Bridge. So I'll start with very brief remarks, and then I'm going to kick it over to these guys to run through the proposed sites as we have sent to you guys in the 60-day comment period. So just to give a very high level overview of the program, you guys all know Link NYC. They are the kiosks that provide free Wi-Fi, free nationwide calling, device charging, access to a tablet, which can bring you to maps, 311, dedicated 911 button. So lots of really great services. There are a bunch scattered throughout CB3. We started rolling those out in earnest in 2016. So 1,800 or so of those were all over New York City. It is in all 5 boroughs. A couple of years ago, we amended the contract to essentially reboot the program to make the kiosk a little more useful. So we'll have all of the same amenities as I just listed, in addition to a multi-tenant shroud at the top of the Link NYC kiosk to accommodate wireless infrastructure. That is to enhance the mobile services within the area it is in. We went through the Franchising Concession Review Commission on that to get the the franchise redone. Just so you guys are aware, a franchise means that we have the authority to partner with companies to deploy telecommunications equipment on the city's rights of way. So what that means is that this is not a taxpayer funded program. It is actually the city kind of renting out these very valuable rights of way for very necessary services, and in return the city gets revenue and franchise fees. So once we got that amendment done, we went to the Public Design Commission, who we presented to on multiple occasions, but they approved the rollout of Link 5G, which is the new structure in commercial districts. And then shortly thereafter, they approved it in residential districts in a more limited capacity. But I believe there, and Rob, maybe correct me if I'm wrong, you might have it in front of you at the moment. I believe a couple of these are in commercial, in residential areas. So that is something we didn't do with the original Link NYC kiosk because of the screens. Any Link 5G that we are presenting in a residential district would not have screens. So I just want to make that clear. Zoning does not allow that, but they would still have all the same amenities except no screens. The ones that do have screens, they are helpful to the communities they're in. We often partner with community boards, other community-based organizations, local elected officials, local businesses to put content on the screens that is relevant to the immediate area. You've probably seen them on the Link NYC kiosks all over the district. I'm sure I have not covered everything, but I think I'll just kick it over to Nick and Rob to go through the presentation.
All right. Thank you, Stacy. Excuse me. And thank you everyone for having us here today. If someone could give me permission to share my screen, I'd be happy to jump into our brief presentation and get into the.
You should have it.
Okay.
Oh, no, I'm sorry, you don't.
I just made him co-host, which I
Okay.
think should give it to him.
Yeah,
Is there any luck there, Nick?
I think so.
Great, got it.
You see this? Is that visible?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you much. And thank you, Stacy, for the overview that you gave. So I'll kind of breeze through the beginning of this a bit, where I kind of give some of the same information. But as Stacy mentioned, Link NYC began as a partnership in 2014 to replace all of the payphones in the city, remove them, replace them with modern telecommunications infrastructure, including free Wi-Fi, et cetera. And so what's the purpose? The purpose is to provide free and equitable access to connectivity, information, and wireless services. And the way that we do that is through that free public Wi-Fi, free nationwide digital calling, emergency services and city services access via the phone, as well as through the tablet on the structures. We include video relay services for the deaf and hard of hearing, and the tablet is fully accessible to those who are also blind or have vision impairments of various kinds. And we provide accommodations on the telecommunications side as well for those populations. You can also access government social services, and we provide free advertising space for the city, community boards, nonprofits, and local businesses as well. And we have a USB port for free charging of mobile devices for those who may need a charge. And so just to briefly touch on why the equitable part of that is so important, this is information based on a report from the city back in 2020, where they found that 40% of residents of the city were lacking access to either home or mobile broadband, and fully 18% had neither. So, about 1.5 million people with no access, and almost 3.5 million with some impairment of their access to digital connectivity. As Stacy said, the program was expanded a couple of years ago now to include the ability to install 5G cellular infrastructure, as well as the other services in the kiosks. And along with that expansion came a mandate to deploy a certain number of structures in what were identified as equity areas of the city. Those are identified by the city based on criteria, as we understand it, such as lack of broadband options, lower median income, a lack of links, and high density of people living there, and also activity in the area. Mention this particularly because CB3 in Manhattan is one of those identified equity areas. So what is Link 5G? This is the design, as Stacy said, that went in front of the Public Design Commission, I think 4 or 5 times. We worked with them over the course of basically a year on iterating the design, finding the best design that we could for New York City that would match the look and feel and the familiarity of the existing kiosk, while providing the same services and also providing a place to put telecommunications infrastructure and radios in a structure that was built specifically for that purpose. So as you can see, the tablet on the front is the same as the existing kiosk, and the overall industrial design was created with an intent to be familiar and consistent with the original kiosk. We worked actually with an Antenna Design, who created the original design for the first kiosk. And so, why was this important? This expansion of service to include cellular. We found you may be personally familiar with this. I know I am. Working through the city, traveling all about the city. There's definitely areas throughout the city that have a real lack of decent service. Even if you have coverage, you may not be able to make a phone call. Your call may drop. You may not have the ability to download even a simple website for sort of mysterious reasons when you're the user. The reason for that is there's a lack of capacity, and it's particularly acute in some areas. And like I said, there's pockets all over the city. But we ran a survey now about a year ago that showed there were significant challenges really across the city, but particularly in the equity areas and areas that are targeted by this expansion. Really 90% are going above 96th Street and in the outer boroughs, where we found folks had the most, the highest reported challenges with access, and also the highest number of people who are reliant purely on their cellular data service for their access to the internet. And so, one of the questions that we get a lot is, why do you need to put radios in the public right of way? Why are Link 5G is important, and other such structures that are being built out. So I just want to mention the evolution of cellular technology. Back in the early days of cell phone service, it really began with these large macro towers that you're probably all familiar with seeing on the sides of highways and out in fields. They're very tall towers, very powerful radios, high up to cover large areas. But as more people were using the service, those radios have a limited capacity in terms of how many people they can serve from one location. So they can reach a broad range of coverage, but they can't provide, they've got a limit to the capacity in terms of number of people. And so you started to see more smaller towers, the tops of buildings, particularly in places like New York. I'm sure you've all seen these cellular towers or cellular antennas and radios like the ones on the right here, strewn throughout really the entire city. Installing more radios covering a smaller area, but able to service more people through that greater density. As the demands have increased through 4G and everyone having smartphones in their pockets, we're finding yet another phase of densification required, bringing more radios, more lower powered radios, but closer to individuals to cover an even smaller area and support even more people using more data. And so you see that in the form of in New York City anyways, on the left, the pole top installations, they call them. So these are repurposing existing infrastructure to put one radio on top of a light pole, or the Link 5G on the right, which is unique from the light poles in that it is a purpose-built piece of infrastructure that can service multiple radios, up to 5 transmission bays, can be filled with antennas, plus the entire pole of the structure is essentially a cabinet that can hold equipment to support those radios. So like I said, it's purpose built, and that's a real key differentiator of Link 5G from the pole tops. And also, it minimizes the street clutter. So with this one location on the sidewalk, roughly 1.5 by 1.5 square of the sidewalk can be utilized and service all of the cellular carriers, plus the free Wi-Fi and the phone calling, et cetera, what we call the digital safety net that you only get with Link NYC and Link 5G. And it's replacing existing sidewalk sites. So, most people aren't aware of just how many sites there were in the city that were dedicated to payphones. Even as recently ago as when we began this program, there were far more than 6,000 sites and more than 8,000 actual handsets, each of those consuming far more sidewalk real estate than the original Link kiosk or the Link 5G. As Stacy said, there's no advertising screens permitted in residence zones. There's limits to how many Link 5G can be deployed, like how dense they can be in a given area. So you won't see more than one of these on a block on either side of the street, nor closer than 200 feet from another Link 5G. And there's lots of additional approvals, and all of these siting requirements are in addition to more than 100 that exist already for the existing Link NYC kiosks. And one other thing we wanted to mention, you can see these changes above ground that are necessary to improve wireless service throughout the city. But in order to provide this service, we need to build out significant infrastructure below the ground. On the right, you can see the purple lines represent the fiber that was deployed to support the original kiosk deployment, and the green lines represent the projected deployment of fiber to support the additional deployment here. And this fiber infrastructure is important because other carriers, so it's what you call neutral host infrastructure. So other carriers can come in and provide additional services on top of this. So residential broadband services, business broadband services, things like that. So we're increasing capacity both above ground and below ground with the aim of both improving the wireless services today, but also providing the infrastructure for improvements in broadband generally in the city. So with that, I'll just show this is the map of the current links deployed, as well as the proposed sites that we're going to speak about tonight. And I'll hand it off to Rob Sakota, who's the president of the wireless division of CityBridge, who's leading the deployment of these sites.
Thank you, Nick, and thank you to members of the committee for taking the time to hear our presentation tonight, and hopefully we can answer some of the questions you may have about the Link NYC deployment. The map that we are showing here tries to show a community district, Manhattan 3, and where we have placed existing kiosks, the existing Link NYC kiosks. As you can see from the map, these are essentially the small purple squares, and there's 67 of them currently located in Community District 3, most of them in the sort of northwestern portion of the community district along 1st, 2nd, and 3rd Avenue. There have been already a number of Link 5Gs installed, 11 within the community district, and we've got another 8 pending installation. Tonight, we're going to show you 6 sites in the blue square, mostly in the Chinatown area, although not all of them, that we are proposing to install Link 5Gs in the future. Go to the next slide, Nick. And this slide just shows you, without a lot of the clutter from the other sites, exactly where the 6 sites are. Next. These are the locations: 263 Grand, 99 Canal, 125 Stanton Street, 28 Bowery, 79 East Broadway, and 57 Avenue A. The addresses are as close as we can get them, but we're going to show you pictures of exactly where they are. Sometimes it's difficult with street addresses, don't match up exactly with locations on the sidewalk. Well, why don't we go to the next slide? So the first one is 263 Grand, and what that means is it's on Grand Street, just next to the corner of Forsyth, and it's adjacent to, I think that's Sauer Roosevelt Park. Next site. Next site is 99 Canal. The site is located in front of this, I guess, the business Canal Business Center. And this is the portion of Canal with the right to your left, as you're looking at this picture, is the exit from the Manhattan Bridge. Next site is 125 Stanton Street. This one is not in Chinatown, a little farther north. The site is in front of a yoga studio, and I believe that is the back of a healthcare center, which is the front of the healthcare center is on Essex Street. Next one is 28 Bowery, in front of the Great New York Noodle Town, where I've had lunch many times. They used to work down the street. And this one is located, as I said, on 28 Bowery, very close to the corner of Bayard. Next site, 90 Broadway. The site is a little obscured on the right by that car, but it's in front of the place labeled ice cream, sort of halfway between there and the bakery. Also a fairly busy intersection. Next site. And the last site is 57 Avenue A. It's in front of, this is a pediatric orthodontist dental office across the street from the Key Foods on Avenue A, very close to the corner of East 4th. This is a site which we moved. I think initially we had noticed this site as maybe it was 41 Avenue A, but that was a little bit too close to a historic landmark. So we've moved the site up to 57 Avenue A. And I believe that's it. So I would turn it back to the members of the community district for their questions or the next item that they want to tackle.
Sorry, Rob, do you want to just clarify? There was another site that we had originally sent that we removed from the list.
Sure. There was a site at 51 Astor Place, which was on the notice to the community district. Similar to the 41 Avenue A site, we decided that the 51 Astor Place site was too close to an individual historic landmark. So we are canceling that site as well. So we have 6 sites left. I'd also note, as Nick said, the one of the sites, the site next to Sauer Roosevelt Park, is also subject to parks approval. There are number of sites which, if you're in a historic district, you need to get, in addition to bring it in front of the community district, you need to bring it to the Landmark Preservation Commission, and sites adjacent to parks also need to go to the New York City Parks Department for approval. So a site at 263 Grand would be subject to such secondary approval.
Thank you, Rob, and everyone for that information. Committee, if we have any clarifying questions for our presenters, now would be a great time. Richard, I have you, then July and David. Go ahead, please, Richard.
Yeah, 2 questions, please. In one of your slides, you stated that advertising would not be permitted in residential districts on these facilities that are being installed. You are aware that most of First Avenue and Second Avenue and Third Avenue and a lot of the avenues within Community Board 3 are residentially zoned with commercial overlays, I believe is the correct way to say it. Correct me if I'm wrong saying it that way, Susan. Does that give you folks an out in terms of where you can provide advertising?
I don't know if I'd call that an out, but yes, advertising screens are permitted in commercial overlays in historic districts, as those are considered commercial zones.
Not historic districts. These are just normal districts within Community Board 3. For example, running between Houston Street and 14th Street on several of the major avenues.
Commercial overlay, I'm saying, is a commercial zone. So advertising screens are permitted subject to the other citing rules.
Okay, so the slide is not exactly accurate. You do permit advertising in residential areas because it has a commercial overlay.
I'm not an expert in city zoning other than to say that my understanding is that commercial overlays are considered commercial zones while they within a larger residence zone.
I would like to get a clarification on that, but not necessarily today. The second question has to deal with the slides that's showing your projected areas. And I noticed, because I happen to live right nearby, you're showing the area on First Avenue. It looked like it was between 3rd and 4th, possibly between 4th and 5th. But all of a sudden you had 2 or 3 of your little purplish, pinkish circles at that particular location. Is there only supposed to be one facility that's being installed, or does the numerous little buttons seem to indicate more than one installation at that location?
Maybe Nick, I don't know if you can show the slide again. I think what you might be looking at, we showed on the map the location of existing Link NYC kiosks. So,
Yep.
So if you see the large configuration up on, as you mentioned, 1st, 2nd, and 3rd Avenue in the northwestern portion of the community district, those purple dots represent existing deployments of the older version of the Link NYC kiosk, the 9.5-foot version. So those are all existing sites. And yes, each of those individual dots represents a separate installation of one of the existing Link NYC kiosks. Now, what you'll notice is that they are, as you noted before, very closely configured, from this scale, almost on top of each other. One of the differentiators between the traditional or the older version of the kiosk and the new Link 5Gs is that the new Link 5Gs will be more geographically dispersed than the original version of the kiosk. And you can see that from the blue dots that we're proposing, and they are much wider apart. And as Nick mentioned, we actually can't put 2 of them on the same block on one side or the other of the street. You can't have them within 200 feet of each other. That was not the case for the original deployment of the 9.5-foot version kiosk.
Will that potentially, does that suggest it may be lessened in the future?
What it is the newer kiosks are being sited and deployed in a way to maximize their efficiency for either mobile coverage, RF coverage, or for the free Wi-Fi signal. And what that means is that we don't really want them that close together, because if you have them too close together, you'll have signal from one interfering with signal from the other. So in the future, you would likely see all of the deployments for the Link 5G having a dispersion pattern more similar to the 6 new sites we're proposing here, the blue squares, and not like the smaller purple squares, which represent the older version of the kiosk.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, thank you.
July.
Thanks, Joshua. I want to thank the presenter for your presentation. We here at the community board, we really try to balance, the public benefit and burden. I used to be on community board 5, and I can say, board 5 never liked these links kiosks. I'm relatively still new to CB3, so I'm still yet to get, a sense of the consensus, how we feel towards these. So I want to try to understand, besides the expanded, connectivity access that you're offering, these links are offering, what is the monetary benefit to the city? Help us understand a little bit. If we did not support your proposal today, what is the city, what is the city standing losing in terms of monetary benefits? Is it a one-time fee, ongoing, because you're getting leased the city's right of way? When you get, new ads or higher paying ads, does the city have a share of that? And who's paying for the electricity on these machines? Thank you.
Thank you, July, for that question. Actually, Brett, you might know a little bit more off the top of your head what the fee and revenue scheme is. But so far, I know that the city has made over $100 million in revenue. So if Brett, you wanted to bring that up, I'll just go through the rest of it. It is all laid out in our franchise agreement, in the latest amendment to it. We restructured the payment plan between City Bridge and the city. So as far as what the city stands to lose, so today we're not seeking approval of the sites. We're seeking comments. We are able to move forward with the sites even if the board does not approve of them. But we've been doing a lot of these meetings all throughout the city. And we've gotten some really fantastic feedback from the community boards. Occasionally we'll get some comments that allow us to take what is it is a proposed site, in that we think it could be built there, right? We measured all the distances. There's over 100 siting criteria that that kind of govern what we can do. We have to make sure that there is enough space for pedestrian right of way. It can't be too close to a fire hydrant or a curb cut or a tree pit. It can't block the line of sight in the road. It can't be blocking a doorway. There's numerous siting criteria. So how we work with City Bridge is they identify sites that look like they could work. We all measure the distances independently. We come up to a consensus, and then we propose it to the community. So sometimes even if everything goes fine, we measure all the distances, everything's good. We actually get to the site, something popped up between the initial site survey and the time we actually were able to start building it. Sometimes there's conduit issues, there's underground vaults, there's any numerous.
Stacy, thank you
Yeah.
for your providing the information. That is not what I asked. So I want to be mindful of the time. Let me ask you a different question. How many links are there having been installed in operation?
Total in the city or just in the community district?
Yeah, in the city, in the city.
About two.
2,000, yeah.
So 2,000, just, roughly, if the city has received $100 million to date, that's 50,000 per link that the city stands to benefit?
It doesn't go by individual link. It's more a share of, well, before it was the share of the advertising revenue. And going forward, added to the advertising revenue is the money that we would get from companies who rent the space for wireless telecommunications at the top.
And Stacy, if I could add, so the model for the franchise, the compensation structure is several fold, right? There's a minimum annual guarantee that the franchise, the City Bridge, must pay the city, regardless of how things get deployed, how many get deployed. And then there's a revenue share, as Stacy noted, that based on the gross revenue generated by the links, that escalates over time or over a certain financial or dollar amount threshold. So when the company reaches a certain amount in gross revenue, city gets, I believe, 8% of that. And then if it reaches another level, it gets 50% of that. But even more so than just the financial considerations here, I think the real value to this franchise, the real value to the city of this franchise, is in the new telecom infrastructure that the city is getting as a result of this. So the very nature of a franchise is that the city give up valuable real estate, in this case, the streets and sidewalks, in return for a company to provide a commercial service. But that commercial service is key to the city's continued growth and standing in terms of its telecom infrastructure, both from a cellular standpoint and from a home broadband, which the fiber associated with the franchise helps to support.
Thank you very much.
David Crane.
Hi. Well, there's a couple things I want to talk about. First, these are much bigger than the original links, the original kiosks. I mean, that giant like refrigerator box that's about 1.5 stories tall up on a stick, they're hideous. I don't, for me to say that, it's something, because I really am not that focused on things like that, but they're hideous. Are they necessary to be that large? What's the requirement behind that? Why could you not go forward with the original design, which were low and uncluttered, as opposed to being very obtrusive?
Sure. So the need for the larger structure is driven by the need to provide a place for cellular radios to be installed. So if you look at the pole tops as the other main piece of infrastructure currently available in the right of way for these, it's similar in size, but shorter in the sense that it only has a limited capacity at the top, and that is a function really of the fact that it's being installed on top of a light pole that has very limited capacity in terms of its ability to bear the weight, right? Because it's not a piece of purpose-built infrastructure. So with a piece of infrastructure that you're designing to hold these radios, I think there's a goal on the part of the city, as well as just from a sort of a design perspective, you want to maximize the utility of the space that you're using. So it's a taller RF area so that you can fit more radios in it and not have to deploy a larger number on top of poles in a given area that would effectively take the same amount of space, but over a larger area, and also require much more construction, tearing up the street, things like that, to deploy that many more locations. So it's really driven by the need to install the radios within the structure, and part of that is driven by a design consideration. I understand these are large. I disagree that they're hideous, particularly considering and obviously I'm biased, but considering the need of the infrastructure. The desire of the Public Design Commission in the city is to have a uniform design, and the radios from the different carriers are all different shapes and sizes. So if you don't have them enclosed in a shroud that's large enough to contain all of the radios, and instead have the radios just hanging off of the pole, they'll all look different. There'll be wires poking out everywhere and antennas, and they'll be, if you think this is hideous, that would be a far more hideous and also inconsistent solution from location to location.
Okay, I totally appreciate the difficulty of building a municipal wireless network. Okay, so the other thing is, okay, the original ones, the low ones, those were focused on the major commercial avenues of the East Village. And these ones are sort of on the outskirts of it, but what gap are you filling? It doesn't look like, the one compelling thing you talked about was sort of equitable access to the internet. And that's the perspective that I don't think about often enough. So it was like, interesting. But these ones aren't near the projects, for instance. You were talking NYCHA. These were not near NYCHA. Some infill housing is nearby, perhaps. What gap are you filling with these locations? I guess is the question.
I can take that. So the answer is, at this point in time, what we were looking to do is identify areas where the combination of demand and potentially what's available for the mobile carriers indicates that there's a need for additional infrastructure that will host mobile radios and or free Wi-Fi. Now, you're correct. There are lots of other areas further to the east in Community District 3, which have less coverage, and we haven't yet reached those areas in terms of Link 5G. But the process is one that is ongoing. You know, this is a deployment which we've restarted last year, but will continue for several years. The ultimate goal is to have 4,000 kiosks, up from the existing 2,000. And it's not as if we're going to put them all in at once. We're putting them in across the city, but incrementally as demand requires. And I would expect over the next few years, we will reach those other areas of Manhattan 3 that you note that we haven't deployed to yet.
Thank you. Susan, go ahead.
I just wanted to answer Richard's question about the commercial overlay. It is considered anything that would be commercial can be commercial on the overlay.
Sorry, say that again, Susan?
If it's anything, if it's a commercial overlay, it allows anything commercial that would be allowed in a commercial, on a commercial zone, commercially zoned street.
Okay, that clarifies it, because I disagreed with the gentleman who said that before. It's not a commercial district, it's a residential district with the overlay.
It's the way they're using the term zone. What we would say, it's commercial street. It's on a commercial street.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Susan. Wendy, and then Kenyelle.
Hello, thank you guys for coming in. My question is, like, if there's any plans to potentially replace the existing kiosks, like maybe like further down the line to the more efficient ones, and that way there's less things cluttering the street, so to speak.
Yeah, I'll take that one. So, we are currently engaged in the deployment of new sites as required by the franchise. But yes, over time, some number, not all of them, but some number of the existing kiosks will likely be converted to the Link 5G. Now, if you can remember the map we showed in the beginning, where you saw that very tight deployment of the existing kiosks where they're very close to each other. As a result of that, you would not see Link 5Gs deployed anywhere, anything like that. So as I said, you can only put one on a street, on a block, I'm sorry, on either side of the block, and you can't put any of them within 200 feet of the other. So while some of those existing 9.5-foot kiosks will be converted to Link 5Gs at some point over the next few years, I think most of those, at least in those tightly packed ones, are likely to stay in the existing form they are.
Thank you very much.
Kenyelle, go ahead, please.
Hi, so my question is, I don't know, I've heard some, some theories that these towers aren't too healthy. What can you say about people who would say that these towers is like standing in front of a microwave, to say?
Well, I can say that it's nothing like standing in front of a microwave, for one. And, just generally speaking, the impacts of cellular radios on health has been studied for decades, and is there are safety standards and limits set by the FCC, and that have been corroborated by the FDA and numerous other organizations, governmental and non-governmental, as being safe, within those limits, and all of the radios that are deployed are far below even those limits. So, while certainly I understand people have concerns about their health, as I do, and everyone should, these towers don't pose a threat to public health.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Richard, you had another question?
Yes, thank you, Josh. It's been a while since I have thought of the concept of right of way. In my own life, I've become aware of the concept right of way as it pertained to railroads and the area adjacent to the tracks as they were constructed and went hither, thither, and wherever. And as the conversation has continued tonight, I've been thinking about, sure, street beds with buses, and given the right of taxis and et cetera, to use the city streets and the areas under the streets. But when you talk about sidewalks, I became aware of the issue a while back. I guess I knew of it, but I became more aware of it when a crack in the sidewalk caused a violation to be issued to my housing complex. And it was issued by the city of New York, and we were required to pay for it, to do the work and to pay for
it. I imagine Richard had more, but I believe he disconnected there. Sorry, Richard. Does anyone, do you want to, you don't have, let's move on.
I think I know what he was going for there. Any flags that are broken as a result of the construction of a Link kiosk, the franchisee must fix it. I don't know where else he was going with that, but I know that the sidewalk is a complicated issue. I'm just not a particular expert on it, but if Richard comes back, and I'm happy to get more into that.
Sure. Great. Committee, do we have any other questions at this time before we open it up to public comment? Okay. So our speakers from OTI and City Bridge, of course, I'll ask you to stay on and listen here. But members of the public, please don't. This is just comment. This is not an open Q&A session, and I don't want to get into a back and forth. So with that said, attendees, please use the raise hand function. I'll just go in order. As you can see, we have quite a few people here. Let's just please try to keep the comments under 2 minutes or so, and then I'll cut you off. So just going down the list here. Susan Peters. Go ahead, please.
I got it. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, great. Thank you. Thank you. I just want to tell the community that in 2021, the U.S. Appeals Court in Washington, D.C. ruled against the Federal Communications Commission, the federal agency in Washington that sets limits for emissions. Their limits were set in 1996 and have never been changed. So the court said basically this: listen, FCC, we've showed you 11,000 pages of scientific studies showing harm from health to the health of people from wireless radiation, most of it below your limits. You have to come back and tell us what are you going to do about it? Because the FCC basically said, well, okay, I'm keeping my limits. Now, I'm upset because I live in a city and the city government should be protecting me. So I don't know why the representatives from our city government, from the technology, do not even read this stuff and say, listen, we have to look at this. Anyway, that's my comment.
Thank you.
Joshua, could I respond to that, please?
Sure. Let's
I'll
try and
be
let's see
brief.
how it goes. But go ahead, please.
I'll be brief. The 2021 Court of Appeals decision, I believe that was referenced, in fact, explicitly accepted the FCC's methodology with respect to issues related to claims that the emission standards could result in cancer. The FCC's was upheld in that regard. With respect to non-cancer type health issues that had been raised by some of the petitioners, the FCC had relied on the FDA in its determination. And all the Court of Appeals did was says, hey, you can't rely on the the FDA, so go back and redo your work. But it was not an assault on the limits. It was not an attack indicating that the 2019 reaffirmation of the limits set by the FCC were wrong. So I just wanted to make that clear. Thank you.
Thank you. Laura Lugo, go ahead, please.
Hi. I'm hoping that it's not a question and more of a comment, but I did notice that on the website it said that the purpose of these link towers is to enhance the coverage in underserved areas. And I would like to know, moving forward, are you considering possibly putting the link towers next to our public schools, which are constantly arguing for better Wi-Fi and having to deal with broadband issues? Second part to that is there any way to ease the fear of the community by putting up educational materials, so that way it'll ease the anxiety of it possibly being like radiation and cancer? And third, and I'm sorry, Joshua, is are you hiring from within the community for repairs and the upkeep of the link towers? Thank you.
Laura, you know those were questions, but we
I know. I was trying to put in the chat.
It's okay. It's okay. We only have a few hands raised, so I would appreciate an answer on those if you guys can do so. Thank you.
Just in terms, go ahead, Nick.
Well, I'll answer the second and third, and why don't you cover the first, Rob, regarding locations near public schools. But so in terms of education, we are actively engaged in outreach and trying to find ways to better educate the community on all kinds of issues, including digital literacy, and that's one of our primary focuses and how to use the technology. But given a lot of the questions that we've gotten recently through forums like this, which we really appreciate, about health, we're looking for how can we share more good information about that as well. And as far as hiring from within the communities, yes, absolutely. In fact, we have open positions. If you know people looking for jobs, particularly in the areas of maintenance and cleaning, if you would direct them to us, that would be great because we need to hire folks and we're trying to hire more. And we would love for them to be from the communities, and many of them, in fact, maybe all of them already are.
And if you could just put your, contact info for someone from your organization in the chat, that would be great. And then just I think, Robert, you had an answer to that other question.
Yes, we don't, in terms of where we are deploying the kiosks, I believe one of the sites, the one at 57 Avenue A, is in fact across the street from a school.
Thank you.
Can I make a comment?
Who's this?
Rose.
I
live in the community and I don't live too far away from a tower.
Absolutely. I'll just put you on the end of the stack here. I'm sorry, just one moment, please. Next I have from the public, Theodora Scarato. 2 minutes, please.
Thank you so much. So I'm Executive Director of Environmental Health Trust, and that court case that's being discussed, our organization was lead petitioner. I also was an individual petitioner. And I'm afraid that's a mischaracterization of the case, because the ruling was that the FCC has been ordered to respond specifically to address the issues that it ignored in our case. There were 11,000 pages of evidence, and they need to respond to issues regarding long-term exposure. They need to respond to issues regarding children's vulnerability, damage to the brain, and also damage to reproduction and so forth. And if you listen to the oral arguments in our case, you can hear the judges say things like this. They said, how do you know long-term exposure is safe? Where do you have the evidence of that? And the FCC simply could not respond. And they said, you need to have an authority. Because the question that everyone should be asking right now is, where is the safety review that our federal government should be doing? And the reality is they have done no such review for over 20 years. In fact, the limits that we have, which were set in 1996, are based on standards developed in 1991 and 1986 report of NCRP. So if you want to put information up, that's great. And I really think there needs to be a full discussion where we can sort of have a real discussion, not this 2 minutes, so that there can be, people can have this information. The problem is that the federal government has unfortunately completely dropped the ball, and that's what's happened here. There's been no review. The EPA was defunded from even doing monitoring. The question I have, that I hope everyone on the call who's listening have, is where are the radio frequency radiation compliance reports? Because if there are 2,000 of these installations, then where are those reports showing that there is compliance with our obsolete FCC limits, which are out of date? And by the way, these limits don't protect against long-term exposure. They are not set to protect against long-term exposure. There never was studies on long-term exposure in 1996 when the limits were set. So they are for short-term, high-intensity, high levels of microwaves that cause overheating. That's what they're set to protect against.
Sorry to cut you off, but that is 2 minutes, and we have a few to get through. And just a reminder that the agenda item we're here to discuss tonight. Thank you, Theodore, for your comment. Just to be clear, is the citing of these 7 Link NYC kiosks. Just to be clear. Obviously, we can talk about the bigger issues, and we have some experts on it here. But we're here to, I'm sorry, the 6 sites now in the neighborhood is this specific agenda item at hand. I have Will Harlow next. Go ahead, please, Will.
Hi, can you hear me all right? Great. Just super quick, more of just like a information question. Is the franchise agreement publicly accessible for the City Link deployment? Cool. Could one of you drop it in here? If not, just point me in the direction.
Yeah, I'll put it in the chat right now.
Cool. I figure most of my questions can be answered just by reading the document. So thanks.
Thank you. Laura Sewell, go ahead, please. You're there you go.
Hi. Hi, thank you. So one comment just regarding the whole process is that I saw on the map the existing Link kiosks and the new proposed sites. I don't see existing 5G towers that have already been installed in the neighborhood. And I think it would be helpful to the community and to the community board to view those so the whole project can be seen in context. I know we have a couple that sort of appeared. I don't know if they went through this process or not, but folks like me who are regular attendees at the community board and several of our local bloggers were just startled when they appeared. So I don't know if this is a new process, I'm glad you're doing it because we certainly should have input on the sites. And then in historic districts, not in a commercial overlay, I understood that there was an additional level of consideration or oversight, and I'm not clear on what that was, if someone can provide clarification. And is there any opportunity to re-examine existing Link kiosk sites, that the old ones that are causing an impingement on the pedestrian circulation because open restaurants and sidewalk cafes have sprung up sort of after they were installed? It may not have been a problem before, but it is now. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. I'm gonna ask our presenters just to not just to keep moving forward, but maybe we'll come back around to some of those questions at the end. Alan Muiman, go ahead, please.
Yeah. Okay. So first, I want to say that I think that overall these towers are going to be better used to public space than something like free parking for cars, especially as they expand into areas near, for example, the public housing and as the previous person mentioned, potentially schools, other areas of opportunity. I am, as the previous speaker mentioned, concerned about getting in the way of pedestrian circulation, especially in areas like Chinatown, which is notoriously tight walkways. I think that one on Broadway specifically, based on the photos, looked a bit tight. So I'd urge you to consider that. And then more broadly, I want to encourage future development of these to expand beyond like the normal approaches. Consider more creative positioning, like, I don't know, corner sidewalk bump outs next to bike parking. If we really want to reduce traffic violence across the city with a built environment that encourages drivers to slow down naturally, we should be, thinking creatively and getting businesses like the one behind Link NYC to pay for other infrastructure upgrades that counter any of the, potential health risks that people are concerned about with the towers, by actually like potentially saving lives by reduced traffic violence. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan. Let's see here. Laura Sewell spoke, right? Great. Moving along to Odette Wilkins. Go ahead, please, Odette.
Yes, hi, thank you. I'm a technology attorney, and I think technology is great when it doesn't harm people, but I do draw the line when it starts to harm people. And the adverse public health effects of this, and this has been noted in other community boards who have disapproved or who have declared moratoria against these Link 5G towers. Now, there's been no pre-market testing of 5G. The U.S. Senator Blumenthal of Connecticut, during a hearing of telecom executives, established that there was no pre-market testing. The WHO's International Agency for Research on Cancer classified wireless radiation as a possible human carcinogen back in 2011. A study in 2000 commissioned by one of the major telecom carriers found links to cancer, leukemia, neurological disorders, and cognitive impairment, with a special caution for children. And also, the Firemen's International Association of Firefighters published a resolution opposing the placement of cell towers near fire stations and calling for a moratorium because they found that they had experienced headaches, memory loss, sleeping and neurological disorders, so much so that they had delays in reaction time and difficulty in actually finding where the fire was. There was severe disorientation among a number of the firefighters. So, and there was also a New Hampshire commission that studied the health effects of wireless radiation, and they found that levels below the FCC emission limits can be harmful. Now, with respect to the law, there's a major federal case in New York that came down last year and basically said that unless the telecom carriers can prove evidence that there is a significant gap in service and that they're using the least intrusive means possible, they have no right to come into our neighborhoods. And that is federal law in New York. And I think that New York City should really comply with that law. In addition, in terms of the digital divide, the U.S. Government Accountability Office indicated that 5G is likely to exacerbate the digital divide. And also the National Digital Alliance indicated that that underserved people and unserved people are probably unlikely to be able to even afford a 5G phone. So that argument also crumbles.
Sorry to cut you off, but there are your 2 minutes and then some. Thank you, Odette, for your comments. There, I believe this person, you had your hand raised earlier. Was calling in on the phone.
Yeah, Rose.
Hi, Rose. Yes, go ahead,
Hi.
please.
Well, I would like to just state that I know that I have, anytime I get near these towers, I end up with a massive headache. I also would like to point out that I have to walk around with an EMF tester to see how much radiation is being emitted from the tower. I also would like to point out that because this tower is close to, it's right across the street from a public school. And for some reason, the high school students are reacting, or something is going on, because there seems to be more violence going on around these towers. And on top of that, I can't even have Wi-Fi inside of my apartment, because if I want to take green bananas and make sure that they ripen, all I have to do is put the green bananas close to the Wi-Fi box and in my apartment, and 3 feet away, and just wait an hour or so for they could start to ripen. So if it does that to bananas, imagine what it's doing to our whole neurological system. I just want somebody to do some testing on how it affects the kids. Why are the children acting so violent these days from the high schools? Why is it that people are almost starting, when they go near these towers, they start to twitch? And then when I usually go with my EMF tester, for some reason, at that moment, it starts to blink red and starts going dee, 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 which means that there's something there that's making.
Thank you, Rose. Sorry to cut you off. That is 2 minutes. I see no other hands from the public. So I'm going to bring it back to committee. I have two questions that have come up from all this. I'm wondering if you can talk a bit about the siting specifics within historic districts, just as far maybe how that procedure differs from the broader commercial zone districts.
I can answer that question. It's the front end of the process is quite similar. So before, if we were to cite a Link 5G kiosk in a historic district, what would happen is we would nevertheless present the site to the community district. But then after that process, we would have yet a separate review with the Landmarks Preservation Commission. We have not yet brought any of the Link 5G sites that we're proposing in historic districts to the Landmark Preservation Commission. So we still have to work out that process with them, but there will be an additional layer of review for any sites that are located in a historic district.
Okay, and then just the other question, and I question how much time I want to give to this, but I mean, it came up a number of times is health and safety concerns, and I know you cited I guess can you speak to some of the science on your end that would support that would oppose a lot of the concerns that clearly some community members have, because obviously this is tested and hopefully you can speak to it better than I can.
Well, I'll jump in there and do my best. I mean, I'll note that none of us on the call are scientists, so we're, I think, going to do our best to summarize a complicated landscape as best we can. So, as I mentioned, the FCC sets limits that are based on scientific study. Those, contrary to some statements, have been reviewed repeatedly over the years by the FCC. The FDA has also looked into this. And, I was just reading earlier today an FDA review of published literature on studies from 2008 through 2018. I think one of the main things that I think is a misconception that people have about cellular radios is the amount of power emitted by them relative to where you are and relative to the radio itself. And the cellular radios don't, your exposure to the radio frequencies from the far lower than the FCC limits. Like on the scale of small cells, like we're likely to install in the Link 5Gs, at street level, you're in the 1 to 2% or so. We haven't actually installed these yet, so we can't provide actual numbers, though we will be able to do that when we do. But in the single digit percentages of the FCC limits, so far below those limits. And those limits are really set for the cell phones themselves, which are radios you're carrying around in your pocket, and that you're exposed to much higher levels in terms of the intensity of the radio frequencies from the cell phone than you ever would be from the radios that are being installed in the streets.
Thank you. I have Michelle and then Susan, and then we'll see what we want to do from there.
Thanks, Josh. I just wanted to say I'm deeply concerned about becoming a platform for disinformation by doing this. I'm going to say I do anti-disinformation work in my real life, and I would like YouTube to flag this video and take it down for anti-5G disinformation. It's not a good service to promote conspiracy theories that none of us are really equipped to debunk live. And I hope that we do not do this in the future. Perhaps we can have people write emails to us, but I do not think that we should become a platform for disinformation, which I fear is what we became this evening, because most people did not talk about the sighting. And it is very dangerous. And we, as a public entity, have a responsibility to be truthful and factual. And I do not think that that's what happened this evening. So thanks.
Thank you, Michelle. Susan.
Sure. I wanted to ask about the local hiring. Are you working with Workforce One, and have you connected at all with our Lower East Side Employment Network?
I would have to defer that to the HR department. I know we work with a number of different organizations, but if you could send on contact information or a link, I'd be happy to pass that on and make sure that we are.
Sure. I'll go through Stacy. We have a network of all the local workforce groups in one network to make it easy for you. So I'll go through Stacy to make those contacts. Thank you.
Absolutely.
It'd be wonderful.
Thank you. And thank you again to our presenters. So here, committee, we can talk about what to do next. We do not need to write a resolution, and we can talk about whether there's even merit in doing so. No agency has asked us for a resolution. And my instinct is that we do not need one. Does anyone have any thoughts here on process or on any of these sites specifically? Which are, let me share. Let me pull up. So yeah, these are the, you can see the 6 sites. Does anyone have thoughts on these, committee? July.
Out of the 6 sites, I really think the one on Grant Street, the first one, 263 Grant Street, is not appropriate. It is right by the D train and the B train entrance and exit. And already on both sides of Grant Street on that block, the sidewalks are not wide enough. And you have a park entrance on each side of the sidewalk. I don't think that's an appropriate siting.
Thank you. And I know, I know you've touched on this, Rob, but tell me one more time, as far as proximity to subways, I know there is some guidance in the siting restrictions. What, can you speak to that?
You know, there is there's a couple different things. One, in terms of sidewalk space, we have to have at least 8 feet of sidewalk passage to ensure that we're not overly crowding the sidewalks. There is a siting criteria that we need to be a certain number of feet away from the subway entrance, but I don't recall it off the top of my head. I think we're not allowed to be immediately there, but we could follow up with that for you.
I actually, I have that in another tab per year. I believe it's 15 feet from an outdoor or elevated subway entrance, which obviously this
yeah. So
yeah.
it's 15 feet from the subway or 3 feet from a subway grade. 15 feet from a subway entrance is correct.
Okay. Which I mean, this would meet, but heard July. Thank you.
And sorry, which site was that again?
That was the Grand Street, the 263 Grand.
Gotcha. Okay.
I'm just curious. I'm just pulling it up on a map because I can't picture it off the top of my head. Oh yeah, that's the block of Christie, like the park.
Yeah, it's the one right on Sarah Roosevelt Park.
Gotcha.
The sort of the cross street in between it.
Okay. Committee, any other site specific comments or discussion? Great. So then the question becomes, what do we want to do, if anything?
Josh, Richard. Having listened to this discussion and the response of my fellow community board members who are present, I have a funny feeling that we would go with your instinct about there being nothing necessary for this board to do at this point. And we would reserve the right to comment on it in near future, next month, 6 months, whenever the issue raises its head again.
Yeah. Okay. To my knowledge, this is the first time that this has come before the board, certainly since I've been on this committee. And I don't want to set a precedent that we are approving or disapproving of, our share of 4,000, sites. They're extensive citing guidelines like we've discussed. And, when things may come up to move them, like we can discuss the Grant Street site, July, if there's specific guidance we want, but does anyone disagree with that barring something specific to a particular site, there's nothing we should do here?
I agree. We should.
Great. Thank you. Lee, I see you nodding your head. Welcome. Nice to see you. Okay. Does anyone share in July's concerns about that particular site? just,
A question for July. Actually, this is on the south side of Grand Street, so it's not right next to the subway station entrances. If it was right next to the subway station entrances and exits, I would have greater concern. So while the south side is not particularly as wide, it's certainly not as narrow as the north side where the subway entrance and exit is.
great, so go ahead, July.
Certainly, but an alternative siting nearby the park, whether it's on Christie or Forsyth, would be, much better in terms of pedestrian flow and safety.
Do you want to, July, do you want to introduce a motion that we can talk about?
No, I don't think we need to at this point, because
Great.
we decided we're not going to do anything.
Perfect. Unless anyone on the committee has anything further, I think we can leave it there. Thank you so much to our presenters from OTI and CityBridge. That was very informative. And I really appreciate you guys taking the time. I hope you'll take our comments and our community's comments into account. And we look forward to talking with you further on this. Thank you for the work that you're doing to, spread technology throughout the city. We appreciate it. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate
Great.
it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thanks, guys. Okay, great. All that talking, no resolution. How about that? Nothing to show for it. Moving right along to our second agenda item, which is the need for more than 30 days to post open streets agenda and comment from community boards. Susan, do you want, instead of me trying to summarize our conversations, do you want to just speak to why this has become
Sure.
an issue?
Sure. So last year, DOT didn't inform us about anything about open streets, so they got better this year. And 2 months ago, DOT came to the Borough Service Cabinet meeting, which is a meeting that includes all the Manhattan district managers, and presented what their process will be for open streets. They are changing categories to some degree. And they mentioned with all of this that there would be 30 days for the community boards to comment. Well, 30 days, as we just voted last month with the cannabis comments, 30 days are not enough for community boards. That was brought, and other divisions of DOT all give a longer time. OTI, just for the kiosks, gave us 60 days. The city normally gives 45 to 60 days. So all the boards objected at this meeting. DOT did not promise anything. The Manhattan Borough President's Office agreed 30 days was not enough, said they would talk to DOT. However, nothing has progressed since then. So if we do a resolution asking for enough time to be able to put this on the agenda, to give people notice, the other boards, we can, it's often we send those to the other Manhattan boards and they do the same. And that would be very helpful, particularly if the Manhattan Borough President is able to be persuasive. So that's basically it. It's asking for our normal community board time, because giving 30 days is like saying we check off the box and allowing comment, but we're not actually allowing it. And the point of community boards is for the public to be involved in decisions for their community. This is certainly not anti open streets whatsoever. And isn't even a vote to approve or disapprove, as opposed to comment, as we just did with the last item.
So moved. For 60 days.
Thank you, Richard. So let's let's talk about it. Michelle, go ahead, please.
Thanks, Josh. I need to run shortly, but I guess my question is like, what feedback are we looking for? I just sat through a session that was more or less not very helpful when it comes to community input. If there are things that we think that DOT would actually listen to, perhaps we would want to put that in the resolution. It doesn't seem like they want to listen, which is why they did the 30 days in the first place, right? So like, I think I'm beating this dead horse, but like, I feel like our community input is not always productive. And so if we can guide that more, that would be helpful. I don't have any brilliant ideas for how to do that, but like, you know, I think if you don't understand my point, let me know. But yeah.
David, do you have an answer to Michelle's or just something else? Let's hear from you and see where this goes, and then come back to maybe trying to answer that question, Michelle.
Okay, well, I would all be for something that could increase the influence that we have, but that's just always been how it is with community boards. Like, what can you do to increase your influence? You can do things like be consistent or something along those lines. But I'm certainly in favor of increasing the length of time here. If we didn't ask for this, we were effectively giving up any possibility of us providing input, since we do publish the agenda right after one full board meeting and can't have an official opinion until the next. We obviously need more than 1 month. So we just need to ask for it. And so obviously we should pass this.
Thank you. Susan?
An answer to what kind of input. For instance, it took us a while, but we had Avenue B between 2nd and 4th Street removed from the program because it was a frequent fire department route, and they didn't have, it didn't give them good access. And the fire department actually came to us and asked us for help. It doesn't have to be for or against an open street. It can be about maybe the hours. For instance, St. Mark's, the police just had changed from midnight to 10 because of the amount of crime in the later hours. It could be about programming. It could be constructive comments. We shouldn't think that things are negative. And DOT in various divisions does take our comments into consideration, and depending on how valid they are. And I think often the more valid or legitimate the comments are about real situations, the more the agencies do listen.
Thank you. And Michelle just texted me. She did have to run. I believe she is, I don't know, she's busy somewhere, but she, I'll pass that along to her, or she'll watch this video. Lee.
Yeah, so I agree that more community input is always a good thing. Susan, what do you recommend for timing? Is it what Richard suggested as 60 days? Is that sufficient? Should we seek more time than that? What have you heard what other community boards are asking for? What would help?
Well, we never need more than 60. It's always 45 to 60. 45 is more likely. 60 is easier. So I would ask for one or the other, or between 45 and 60.
Then Joshua, I would second Richard's motion for a resolution requesting 60 days.
That was 60. Great. Wendy, we have a draft written by the office. Wendy, are you able to pull that up and share your screen?
Josh, I sent you a later one
Okay.
because I added one line because of when we were emailing.
Yes. Let me find that in one of the, I can close all these 5G tabs now. Okay. We've emailed a lot today, Susan.
It's what you pay me for. The one with the attachment.
Let's see. Oh, yes, Open Streets. Great. So Wendy, I'm just going to forward this to you.
Okay.
There you go. Okay, you should have that.
Refreshing. I think it's just taking a second to come in.
Delay is all the fault of the 5G people.
Full circle.
Okay, got it. Wait, that's not it.
Let me make sure that.
Oh, I got it now.
Okay.
Maybe I should get that 5G. Okay. Oh, I cannot share screen. Could you
Oh,
show
here,
more?
one sec. Make you a co-host. There you go.
Can everyone see?
Yeah.
Whereas next is.
Can you maybe put the, can we see the whole page? Think you'll have to add in the 60 days.
Let's see. Yeah, so I think just before we get into it, we should. Let's, I can read, I'm thinking, what would I ask David to do? I can just read it, just so we're all on the same page. I had a chance to review this earlier today. So just in real quick. Whereas New York City's Open Streets program turns streets into public space, allowing for activities that promote economic development, support schools, and allow New Yorkers to enjoy cultural programming and build community. And whereas community boards are designed to create a structure for the community to have input into decision-making for their communities. And whereas community boards publish agendas for the following month for transparent and timely notice to the community. And whereas more than 30 days is needed for community boards to post an agenda and carry out the process through committee and board votes. And whereas all city agencies allow more time for the community board process and allow 45 to 60 days, including DOT, which allows a 45-day consultation period for community board comments for intercity bus permits, and has extended that time period 100% of the time when requested by CB3. And whereas confirmed Open Streets applications only allow 30 days for public comment, which is not enough time as allowing for community input to inform a CB comment, and effectively does not permit public/community board input while it is checking off the box to provide notice to the community. So therefore be it resolved that the deadline for public comment for Open Streets should be extended from 30 days to, we can make that 60 days.
Okay.
Anyone have any, all comment we heard before was pretty positive. Does anyone have any comments on this, revisions you would make with this motion on the floor? Or this, yeah.
I think it looks good. It covers basically kind of like everything that we were talking about and been talking about for like the past 2 months, I think, because we've heard it. So I like it. I think it's pretty good. I think it's really good.
Great. Then let's just take a vote on this resolution. Procedurally, David, all right? I mean, we can just, the motion's on the floor. Okay, great. And this is our last agenda item, so let's just have this also work as our final vote. Just take attendance to close out here and vote on this motion. I'll go last, Wendy.
Okay. Gotta switch to my other screen. Okay, David Crane,
Yes.
okay. Wendy Lee, yes. Lee Berman,
Yes.
Tariq Terrell. Tariq. Kenya Hernandez,
Yes.
Michelle Cooper Smith, she's left.
No.
Oh, you're still low.
Yeah, no, I'm present.
Oh, hold on. We voting for the end of the night or we voting on the reso?
Both.
So can I say no to that reso and yes to my attendance?
Yes, yes.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Okay. David Louis. David Louis. Richard Ropiak,
Yes.
July Yang,
Yes.
Joshua Waterman.
Yes.
Great, thank you very much.
Great. I believe the meeting is now adjourned.
Good
Right?
job, Josh. Good night.
Thanks. Thanks, everybody. See you later.
Thank you.